So, Rob, if you'd like to come forward. You know, I got this phone call Friday about 4 o'clock or so and saying, things are not looking, well, it was actually 4 o'clock, I think, his time. Things are not looking great for us to finish so I can get on the plane. That was Rob telling me that he wasn't sure what was going to happen, and I just kept right on talking, saying, well, that's okay. When you get in Saturday morning, you come on over. But then I get this text yesterday saying I'm on the plane. So grateful to my good friend, Rob Bishop. Thank you.
Actually, Gail, if you want to keep going, I'll just walk away and you can stay here. All right. Hey, no, I'm appreciative of being here. I'm appreciative of what you all are doing here for the state of Utah, for society, for our communities in general. It's always very positive. I recently did, for my own kids, a history of my parents and my grandparents, so they would have it. And in researching about my own grandfather, I found a couple of things that I had not known before. One, that he was very involved in politics. Ironically, the first state Republican convention we had, he was a delegate. He was in city council, on all sorts of library boards and community boards. Number two, I found out that he was, his personal hero was Teddy Roosevelt. And number three, I also found out that when he was, because he immigrated from England during the Civil War. Worked up in, when he was young with his brother up in Alta in the logging industry. And at one of the elections, the owner of the company wanted everyone to vote, so he gave them the day off if they would vote, and he inspired them on which way he wanted them to vote anyway. So my grandfather and his brother voted in Alta and got on the train and came down to Salt Lake, voted a second time. And it was early, so they got on the train and went up to Kaysville and voted a third time. Now, I just want you to know, of all those things I learned about my grandfather, the one that was most chagrining to me, and for which I am most embarrassed, is the fact that Teddy Roosevelt was his icon. Voting doesn't bother me at all. He did a good Chicago tradition. But Teddy Roosevelt does bother me because he was the very first one that started the administrative state. And that's he was the one that said a president should never hide his power under a handkerchief, and he also said he didn't think there was anything wrong with including more power in one individual. I'm assuming as long as he thought he would be that particular individual. Another historian once said Teddy Roosevelt was like a 6-year-old. He's adorable, but you don't want to give him anything which he can hurt himself. Taft kind of pushed the administrative state back a little bit, not much, but a little bit, and then Woodrow Wilson came in full bore because Woodrow Wilson hated the constitutional concept of separation of powers. He called it political witchcraft. He said the founders had designed this thing to put power in corners so no one could find it, which is exactly what they intended to do. And since that time, we have been fighting the administrative state ever since that time, with the whole goal of the administrative state is that decisions should be made by experts, and you should remove that nasty thing called politics from the system. Without realizing that when the founders designed our system, politics was the only way in which people would have their voices heard and their opinions taken into account. And just think about it. If there is an agency of government that makes a rule, and you don't like it, what can you do about it? They may claim they will take comments, but what can you actually do about it? If indeed Bears Ears Monument goes through and they're going to come up with a land plan and the people who live in that area don't like the land plan, there is not one solitary thing they can do about it. But the founders, that's why doing everything in the executive branch is just so wrong. The founders, though, envisioned a system where every 2 years I had to go and run for election, which means whether I want to or not, I got to listen to you. Every 2 years. This is not that, no. Only in the even-numbered years. But it does mean that the legislative branch is the vehicle that hears people because it is designed for them to hear people. And if your voices are going to be heard, it's going to be by decisions made in the legislative sphere. That is why most of the decisions were supposed to be done in the legislative branch and then only executed in the executive branch. That is also why by Speaker Ryan is pushing his initiative called The Better Way. and I'm part of the Article 1 task force on the better way. It is not simply a power struggle between the president and Congress. It is the idea that decisions should not be made in the executive branch, but should be put back in the legislative branch. And then my particular spin on it is I want to make sure that we can then move it to make sure that those decisions are moved back to the states where they should have been done in the first place. That is still the purpose and the goal. I am scared and frustrated with that. I remember before I was elected to Congress, I took attention to what think tanks were saying in Washington, and a lot of them were talking about federalism, which is a concept I think is great. And then there was a time in early 2000s when Bush was president and we had control of both the House and the Senate, and all of a sudden those think tanks switched and all of a sudden started to say, let's not push federalism anymore. We have the power now. Let's see if we can put through conservative things, but do it on a federal level. And then we lost control of the House in 2006, and those same think tanks were saying the Republican Party had lost their principles. Yeah, we'd all lost our principles. And the fear that I have is I hope people do not have unnecessary expectations now. The idea that we have the Republican Party has the presidency of the Senate, marginally, and the House, that we can also all of a sudden push through all sorts of things. We can't lose track of that desire to do things administratively simply because we have the power to do it, and lose fact of the philosophical foundation is that we won't always be in that situation. We've got to change the system so it's done philosophically and constitutionally, not simply because we have the power to do that. We cannot ignore that situation. We had a hearing. I'm sorry, I'm running over. I apologize. When you show me that sign, I'll quit regardless of where I am. That's for them. That's even worse. We had a hearing in the Armed Services Committee, and we had to do a waiver for General Mattis to be Secretary of Defense. I think he's a very competent guy, and I'm hoping he will be there. But he was going to come and talk to the House committee before we voted on that, and then the Trump transition team said, no, you can't do it because, for whatever reason, they said, we don't want you to. We only want you to talk in front of the Senate for confirmation. You go to the House once you're confirmed. Well, people came unglued. Everybody did on that committee, which surprised me because we are not an advice and consent committee. All we're deciding is whether there should be a waiver or not, and you don't need him to testify to decide whether there should be a waiver. But everyone said that, and it became a very partisan vote. And I just remember one on the other side of the aisle sat there and said, I hope this does not become an indication of what we can expect from Trump, that this new president coming in will not disregard Congress, will not try and make executive actions on his own, will not try to forget the constitutional separation of powers. And I thought to myself, good grief, where have you been the last 8 years? But that question still is there. This president, up until last week, had made 29 monuments under the Antiquities Act, or expanded. The record was 30. This week, he created 3 new monuments and expanded 2 more so he could have the record. Look, when we introduced what I thought was the PLI, the goal was threefold. Number one is to have economic areas where businesses know where they can actually invest and actually succeed in that investment. Number two, have recreation areas that won't have arbitrarily that recreation opportunity taken away by the land managers. If there's a trail that you can hike and they want to close it, they better have another trail that you can use at the same time. And then number three, conserve things that are worthy of conservation. My problem in doing that is I brought to the table people who have never in their lives compromised at any time for anything. In fact, one of the conservation groups came up to me one time and said, Rob, I feel sorry for you because you were sincere in what you were trying to do, but let's face it, Group X over there never was serious about what they were doing. They were only there so they could watch us. I was surprised within the environmental community how much jealousy and interactions they have one against another. And it was true. This group attacked the PLI before we actually even had a bill drafted. And they've been running commercials ever since that time, solely because they realized that if indeed I solve the problems of land management in eastern Utah, they don't have jobs. They can't raise money. And Bears Ears did, because I think this is where you want me to go eventually, is based on what I think are the three huge lies. Number one, the administration said this is the same situation, this is the same area that we proposed in the PLI. No, it's not. They proposed 1.3 million acres. I had 1.4 million acres of conservation areas, but divided into four different areas, each with a different purpose and a different reason for being there. Bears Ears was much smaller than that. It's not the same thing that was supposed to be there. Number two, they also said, well, we're going to give Native Americans co-management of this area. I want you to know I like the idea of co-management. It's the right thing to do. That if Native Americans can co-manage this area that is for their sacred rituals or whatever it is, maybe counties can co-manage other areas later on in the same concept. I want that concept there. But I want you to know that this administration promised co-management and they cannot deliver. In fact, in my original draft, I did what we could do legally, which is simply saying they can give advice to the Interior Department, but Interior still does what they want to do, and they criticize that. In the President's declaration, he came up with a plan to have a commission so they could give advice to the Interior Department, but the Interior Department administers, and that was hailed by the environmental community as brilliant moving forward on this issue of co-management. I believe in co-management, but it can only be done by Congress, and once again, that's the second big lie that bothers me the most. Third is they said there will be guarantees with this monument status. First, there will be a guarantee that the area will be protected. Now, I want you to think of this for just a minute. Right now, Bears Ears is owned and managed by BLM. They patrol it. If they only have one person to patrol that area and they think they need more, hire some more people to patrol it. Because once you create a monument, the monument will be owned by and managed by BLM, who will patrol it. The exact same people with the exact same resources, the exact same concept. Anyone who says this has more protection now, that is just, I didn't say damn, but that is just a lie. It's a total fabrication going forward with that. The Native Americans want specific things they can do on that land. They want to do their wood gathering, but they want to drive their trucks in to do the wood gathering. In our piece of legislation, we wrote it so they could actually do that. You cannot do that in a monument, nor can you guarantee any other thing that they want to do in the future because land managers can change the rules at whim, and arbitrarily they do. In Grand Staircase Escalante, it was supposed to guarantee grazing rights. It doesn't. Simply because the land managers down there decided to change it and they have the power and the authority to do it. So in some way, I am frustrated because this process and this monument shows what happens when a president simply does not care. He picks up his phone, he uses his pen. Fortunately, President Trump will not have a pen or a phone. Does have a Twitter account, which worries me even more, but doesn't have a pen or a phone. But it's an example of this kind of decision that has total disregard for the truth, the reality, or anything else they want. In fact, when this administration rolled out their plan for a Bears Ears monument, they had a picture of Arches National Park, hundreds of miles to the north. It's an example of what is bad in the administrative state. And it's an example of what I am still, in the few years I have left in Congress, I'm still dedicated to try and change that. I want to make sure that when we do something, in fact, some people are now coming up to me and saying, let's not pass legislation, let's just ask the new administration to do it administratively. And I'm saying no, because at some time I'm going to get another bad administration. Change the law. Until it's done in law, there is no guarantee. And that's also why, when I'm still looking at what we had in the Public Lands Initiative, there were still guarantees for grazing rights. There were still ways of managing wilderness so you can get in there for wildfire protection and conservation. We had areas in there for tourism. We had recreational guarantees for hunting and fishing that couldn't be taken away. I'm still going forward with that because there are a lot of things I still want to do, and I want to do it the right way, which is not through administrative state, but it is through the legislative process. Because the legislative process, bottom line, is still the only way people's voices are going to be heard and going to be considered, and you can have that kind of input. I'm rambling. I apologize for that. I'm also tired, but I do appreciate the invitation to be here. I appreciated when I was in the legislature having the opportunity of working with Gail and everyone at Eagles Forum. It was a very positive experience. And I hope to continue on that because, once again, the goals that you have, the concepts you have are the concepts that I think are the right direction to push this country going with, once again, the idea of doing things constitutionally, doing things so people are truly heard, but truly heard in the legitimate way that was supposed to be done. Our founders who came up with this system were inspired to do it, and it's not an accident that that was the way it's supposed to be. And all our experimentations of trying to change that have not been positive experiences. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity of being here with you. I'll beat you. I'm done. You want me to take questions? No. I'm serious with that. You got 5 more minutes. Enjoy your own free time, but thank you so very much for everything you do. I appreciate it.